In 1942, the quiet of the English countryside was shattered by armed men storming a storied mansion turned luxury hotel, sealing its gates. There were no explanations, only soldiers, guard dogs, and midnight convoys slipping in and out. Locals caught whispers of a strange name, Station 9. Behind those locked doors, a brilliant but obsessive inventor designed weapons unlike anything the British Army had fielded. Hideable pistols, foldable motorcycles, and unprecedented contraptions that would later inspire 007's most secret spy tech. Dropped by parachute into Nazi-occupied Europe, these devices gave resistance fighters the means to strike from the shadows so suddenly, so invisibly, that even at the heart of the Reich, no German officer could ever feel truly safe again. In 1940, Station 9 was chosen as a top-secret hub where some of Britain's best engineers and inventors would design the useful toys of the Special Operations Executive, or SOE. Convinced that World War II could be won through sabotage, assassinations, small strike forces, and spy operations, Winston Churchill created the SOE soon after his commando initiative proved successful. But the new organization's mission was far more ambitious. Its purpose, as Churchill famously put it, was to, quote, set Europe ablaze. This meant making the Nazi occupation as costly and chaotic as possible, arming resistance movements, conducting sabotage and espionage, and eliminating key targets. While commandos were focused on direct battlefield engagements and short-term tactical successes, the SOE was centered on long-term destabilizations of entire regions, strategic mayhem. That's where the situation became much more complex for the SOE's branch tasked with weapon design. Both groups needed a steady flow of new weapons and gadgets. But unlike the commandos, SOE operatives were often local partisans with little formal military training and almost no access to standard equipment. That meant the organization needed a hidden facility to design and produce weapons that were deadly, concealable, untraceable, and simple enough for a teenage resistance fighter to master. The search led them to the Fried, a rural estate turned country inn just outside Welwyn Garden City. Secluded, yet only an hour from London, the property was large enough for the SOE's needs, but not so isolated that supply or personnel movement became a logistical headache. As such, in August 1943, the exclusive hotel was abruptly commandeered by the British Directorate of Military Intelligence. A young inventor by the name of John Robert Dolphin was appointed to command the operations in the mansion. He had experience as an engineer, but he was only a cadet. To fix this, he was temporarily promoted to captain, then to war substantive major, and then to lieutenant colonel. In charge of all the scientists and engineers was Professor D.M. Newitt, who immediately began the process of turning the estate into the ultimate lab and testing grounds. Small cabins and barracks were constructed to house laboratories, workshops, and firing ranges. In contrast to the SOE's espionage-oriented counterpart, the Ministry of Supply, famed for whimsical spy gadgets like a compass concealed in a button, a pipe with hidden film, shoelace saws, or a cigarette pack that doubled as a radio, Station 9's creations were simpler in design, but infinitely more lethal. One of these designs was what would come to be known as the Well gun, a submachine gun forged to arm resistance cells all through Europe. The prefix Well was a nod to the nearby town of Welwyn, and it would be a distinction in most devices developed by Station 9. It was intended to replace or supplement the Sten gun in resistance supply drops, addressing the Sten's early issues with reliability, safety, and inconsistent manufacturing quality. Designed by F.T. Bridgman with input from other SOE and military bodies, the Well gun was built around the same 32-round single-feed magazine as the Sten, allowing interchangeability and simplifying logistics. Ammunition compatibility was another deliberate choice. Its 9mm parabellum round was widely used by both Allied and Axis forces, making it possible for resistance fighters to use captured enemy stock. The weapon was a simple blowback design, firing from an open bolt. It featured a folding stock that collapsed over the barrel, reducing its length to just over 16 inches for easier concealment during transport or movement through urban areas. A wooden pistol grip and small foregrip gave it better handling and balance compared to the Sten, improving accuracy in short-range engagements. Despite positive feedback from Allied commando units and SOE operatives, the well gun was never adopted for mass production. No definitive reason for its rejection has survived. Only small numbers were made, and its operational use was limited. However, the well gun's follow-up, the well rod, would make up for all the action her sister missed. The well rod emerged from the workshops of Station 9 in 1942, conceived by Major Hugh Q.A. Reeves, one of the station's most obsessive and brilliant inventors. Where the well gun had aimed for firepower, the well rod pursued an entirely different philosophy: absolute silence. This wasn't a weapon for pitched battles or resistance raids, but for the darkest work of war: assassination. The design was radical in its simplicity. The well rod appeared as an unremarkable cylinder, roughly 12 inches long and just over an inch in diameter. When disassembled, or with its magazine removed, it resembled nothing more threatening than industrial piping, or as many operators called it, a bicycle pump. This innocuous appearance was deliberate. A weapon that didn't look like a weapon could pass through checkpoints or lie hidden in plain sight. At its heart lay a manually operated bolt-action mechanism, chosen not for rate of fire, but for reliability and silence. The knurled knob at the rear served as the bolt handle, rotating 90 degrees to lock and unlock. The system produced only a faint click as the firing pin struck the primer, with no mechanical cycling or ejection port slamming open. The real genius lay in the integral suppressor system. The barrel itself was perforated with 16 to 20 holes, allowing propellant gases to bleed off gradually into an expansion chamber. This served a dual purpose: reducing the gas pressure that would create the telltale crack of a gunshot and slowing the bullet to subsonic speeds. The magazine itself doubled as the weapon's grip, detaching completely to aid concealment. Every section, from the ported barrel to the rubber wipes, worked together to achieve a gunshot quieter than a finger snap. Tests recorded the .32 version at just 73 decibels, quieter than most modern suppressors, not a small feat for 1940s technology. Unlike the well gun's documented trials and field reports, the well rod slipped into the shadows almost immediately after production began in 1943. Exactly what would be expected from a top-secret weapon that was actually successful. The Americans recognized its potential early. The Office of Strategic Services acquired examples for evaluation at the Naval Gun Factory in Washington between July and September 1943. Their assessment was unequivocal. The British design was superior to anything they could develop quickly. Rather than waste time creating an American version, they simply adopted it as the hand-firing device Mark I, producing an unknown number at facilities including the Southwest Pump Company near Dallas. The initial deployment focused on resistance groups across occupied Europe. Thousands were airdropped into Denmark, Holland, and other territories, though exact numbers remain classified. The SOE had initially planned a coordinated campaign in 1943. Resistance cells would use their well rods to simultaneously assassinate SS and Gestapo officers across the continent within a single month. This audacious plan was reportedly shelved after Operation Anthropod, the assassination of Reinhard Heydrich. The brutal reprisals, 13,000 arrests, 5,000 civilians executed, and the obliteration of entire villages demonstrated the terrible math of the targeted elimination of Nazi officers. The operation was quietly scrapped. Yet the well rod found its place. Danish resistance fighters employed it throughout the occupation. SOE and OSS operatives carried them into France, Norway, and the Balkans. In the Pacific, evidence suggests use against Japanese officers. The weapon's completely sanitized nature, bearing no markings save serial numbers and cryptic symbols, meant that captured examples revealed nothing about their origin. The war's end didn't retire the well rod. Here, documented history fractures into rumor and myth. Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group reportedly used them for prisoner snatches and eliminations. Special Forces Detachment Berlin, the classified 39th, and later 410th, maintained well rods in their arsenal throughout the Cold War, cached in secret sites for stay-behind operations should the Warsaw Pact invade. British Special Air Service veterans have admitted deployment during the Falklands and Desert Storm. Perhaps most intriguingly, Operation Gladia weapons caches discovered across Europe contained well rods decades after the war, suggesting a continuous role in NATO's clandestine preparations for Soviet invasion. The modern Brugger and Tomei VP-9, marketed implausibly as a veterinary tool, bears an uncanny resemblance to Reeves' original design, fueling rumors that the original blueprints were leaked and variations of the gun's design are still in use. But weapons were not the only pieces of technology developed inside the enigmatic halls of the Frith. Among the most curious proposals were some unusual means of transportation, like a foldable motorcycle, unlike anything previously deployed in war. It was the brainchild of John Robert Dolphin. A lifelong motorcyclist with a penchant for speed, Dolphin, together with racing bike engineer Harry Lester, transformed an airborne survival idea into reality: the Well bike. Designed to fit into a standard parachute drop canister, this diminutive machine could be assembled and rolling in a breathtaking 11 seconds after impact. Like other inventions, the idea was that this vehicle could be dropped into enemy-held territory to be used by resistance fighters for high-speed mobility. The idea then became to drop it along paratroopers behind enemy lines, where the Well bike would allow them to move at unprecedented speeds and capture pivotal objectives like bridges and railroads before enemy defenders could mobilize to the sites. With its 98cc two-stroke Villiers engine, single-speed gearbox, and minimalist frame, no suspension, no lights, just a solitary rear brake, the Well bike prioritized lightweight portability above comfort. Its fuel capacity was only 3.7 liters, pressurized via a hand pump to feed the carburetor, yet it could cover roughly 90 miles at up to 30 miles per hour. Although its main purpose was covert deployment alongside paratroopers, reality ended up calling it into action in all sorts of operations, including Normandy, Arnhem, and beach landings by commandos and airborne units. Unfortunately for Dolphin and his ambitious schemes, the motorcycle proved too fragile and underpowered for rough terrain, turning what could have been a game-changer device into an underused gadget. Still, nearly 3,600 to 4,000 would be manufactured by the Excelsior Motor Company between 1942 and 45. Though its battlefield impact was modest, the Well bike illustrated Dolphin's ingenuity and the harsh reality that SOE equipment had to go through. But where motorized escape failed, submersible stealth was next on Dolphin's agenda. He devised the Wellman, a one-man midget submarine, conceived to deliver explosive charges stealthily beneath enemy vessels. It featured a rudimentary conning tower with armored glass and no periscope, forcing the pilot to peer directly through a small viewport. Its payload was a 560-pound charge fitted by magnetic clamps. During advanced testing in November 1943, an urgent situation suddenly developed. 4 Wellman craft were launched from motor torpedo boats into a Norwegian fjord. The small vessel soon began to present mechanical malfunctions, and the men operating them faced serious navigational issues. One of the submarines was captured by local German forces after becoming entangled in nets, while the others were scuttled by their crews when it was clear there was no way of returning to their rendezvous point in their current condition. If the Well bike and Wellman had proven that Station 9 could think beyond the battlefield and into the strange waters of covert mobility, then the next wave of inventions pushed that boundary even further, into territory that seemed half science fiction, half fever dream. These were the other Well weapons, devices so unusual and specialized that even many SOE operatives never knew they existed. The first was the Well Wand sleeve gun, the younger, meaner cousin of the Well Rod. If the Well Rod could be hidden in a drawer or a bicycle basket, the Well Wand could be hidden up your sleeve, literally. It was nothing more than a slender, featureless steel tube, about as thick as a broom handle. Inside, a simple firing mechanism and an integrally suppressed barrel turned the operator's arm into a point-blank execution device. The idea was chilling. Walk alongside the target, press your wrist against them, and fire. No aiming, no stance, just a muffled thump, and the job was done. Hugh Reeves had designed it for the tightest of spaces: doorways, alleyways, crowded train cars, where drawing a conventional pistol was impossible. There was no trigger guard, no grip, no moving slide to give it away. The whole firing action was hidden behind a sliding collar along the barrel, operated with a subtle push of the free hand, or even by pressing the muzzle into the target. Made in both .32 ACP and 9mm Parabellum versions, with perhaps only 200 produced, the sleeve gun was a weapon of pure purpose, cold, efficient, and invisible until the last second. If the sleeve gun was for the alley, the motorized submersible canoe, nicknamed Sleeping Beauty, was for the harbor. Reeves turned a canoe into a battery-powered stealth sub that could slip under booms, nets, and patrols to deliver limpet mines directly onto enemy ships. At just under 13 feet long, and with a top speed of around 4.5 knots, the Sleeping Beauty was a one-man infiltration craft in its purest form. The pilot rode in a diving suit, partially submerged, steering with a control yoke and breathing from an oxygen supply. The batteries gave about 40 nautical miles of range, enough to slip into a harbor at night, plant mines, and vanish before the sun came up. The name came from a trial in which Reeves, worn out from endless testing, was found dozing inside the cockpit. Then there was the Well Freighter, the SOE's strangest hybrid of boat and submarine. At 37 feet long, it looked like a civilian motor launch, the sort of thing you'd expect to see hauling fishing nets or weekend picnickers. But this innocent hull could dive to 130 feet, carry 2 crew and several passengers, and haul nearly 2 tons of cargo, arms, explosives, even agents into enemy territory. On the surface, its petrol engine gave it a 1,000-mile range. Underwater, electric motors could push it 40 miles in near silence. Only a single Well Freighter is believed to have seen operational use in the Pacific, where it carried agents and supplies to Japanese-held islands. Built in total secrecy by a landlocked truck company, the vessels were shipped to the coast under tarps, their true nature unknown, even to many of the workers who made them. Finally, the most obscure of the lot, the Well Bum. The name alone was enough to make agents laugh, but its intent was deadly serious. This was a swimmer's propulsion unit, strapped to the operator's back like an oversized rucksack. Inside was a battery and motor driving a small propeller, meant to push a diver quietly toward an objective at about 2 knots for a couple of miles. It was designed for agents parachuting into water, giving them the means to cross harbors or rivers swiftly before the enemy could react. But in practice, the Well Bum struggled. Too much drag, too little power, and not enough endurance. Few ever saw service, and today it survives mainly as a footnote in the long list of Station 9's near misses. Once the stealthy contraptions of Station 9 had slipped into the shadows, its 2 leading minds returned to the wider world, still restless, still inventing, but with very different legacies. Lieutenant Colonel Dolphin didn't vanish into obscurity after the war. Instead, he pivoted seamlessly into civilian industry and even the nuclear era's most secret corridors. As chief engineer at AWRE Aldermaston, he credited himself with creating the trigger mechanism for the British tactical nuclear weapon Redbeard. When he asked in 1959 for a financial award and recognition, his claim was firmly rejected. Officially, his work on Redbeard fell within his remit, and the design itself was later superseded by US-informed developments. Despite his disappointment, Dolphin remained prolific. He led the UK AEA's research group, directed companies such as Lansing Bagnall, and later crafted innovations ranging from industrial forklift improvements to early mobility scooters. Knighted as a CBE in 1956, he passed away in 1973 in Whitchurch-on-Thames. By contrast, Hugh Q.A. Reeves was still chasing silence, this time inside jet engines. Post-war, he patented enhancements in diving gear in 1950 and aircraft wheel chocks in 1955, continuing his restless invention streak. But in a cruel twist of fate, Reeves met a unique end. While testing noise reduction equipment on a jet-powered Hawker Hunter F5 fitted with a Sapphire engine at RAF Bittiswell, he was tragically pulled into the intake of the very silencer he was trying to tame. Ultimately, most of their wartime inventions never achieved the widespread deployment their inventors had envisioned. Some were too specialized, others too temperamental, and a few were simply too far ahead of their time. But taken together, they reveal something essential about Station 9, that its real genius wasn't in any single weapon, but in the willingness to invent anything, no matter how strange, improbable, or risky, if it meant striking at the heart of the enemy.